Yo, it's your boy Logos, and today I want to react to a Sowell and Jordan Peterson video, this telling the truth about borders. In the past decade or so, I've heard a lot of people say that borders aren't necessary, they're racist, they're a product of imperialism and white supremacy. And me personally, as a black man, I don't agree with that. I think borders are very important. It helps cut off lines of communication. It helps prevent governments of other places having control over your people or control over you, and you may not be a fan of that. I think it's very important. And if you want to be under control of a different government or be governed by a different type of people, then you could just move there. But a world government or a world where there's no borders, I just don't like that. I don't want stuff that happened in Canada or Mexico to bleed more into the United States. We're already neighbors, but being under the same government, it's just gonna be all the same. And I don't want that. But let's see what Jordan Peterson and Sowell got to say.
Borders are reasonable. How about that?
I'm glad the crowd got some sense.
Well, see, one of the things about the immigration debate is they talk about immigrants in the abstract, and there are no immigrants in the abstract, as that passage indicates. And we don't know who those people are that are here. They may all be PhDs from the University of Chicago, in which case they should all stay. Or they may in fact be people who majored in sociology at Berkeley, in which cases get them all out of here as soon as possible.
The law is the border that stops someone from stealing your laptop. And if it's an Apple laptop, well, it's the sort of laptop that a social justice warrior would carry. And then the social justice warrior is going to be very irritated if you happen to purloin their laptop. And then you might point out to them, you know, it's a border that protects you from having that thing taken. And they say, well, the border should be open. It's okay, man, no problem. You hand over that laptop right now. And everything else you own too. If you don't like borders, and you can get rid of the damn walls in your house, and you don't need doors on your bedroom either.
Exactly.
And we can keep an eye on you whenever we want. And so much for borders. One of the things that really differs between liberals and conservatives, between the left and the right the right likes tight borders between things. It's part of being conscientious at every level, conceptually, sexually, familially, provincially, nationally. The right says, look, let's keep the borders between things pretty distinct. And the left says, yeah, maybe not, because some of those borders are in the wrong place, and a little bit more free flow of information wouldn't be a bad thing. And the thing is, they're right, but so are the conservatives, and that's why you have to talk. It's like, well, we've got some borders.
That's why you can't echo
That's a
chamber.
good thing. Maybe some of them need to be moved around a little bit, and that's what the political dialogue is for. But that doesn't mean that borders themselves are a bad idea. They're a great idea, because without borders, everything mashes into the same untenable state of undifferentiated chaos, and you can't live in that.
Exactly.
And so the people who are trying to tear down the borders conceptually, politically, and practically, what they want is the chaos that would bring. They either want that, or they're too foolish to know that their pursuits will produce that. So let's be a little bit clear that if you stand up and say, yeah, borders, they're okay. They've got their problems, but they're okay. That doesn't make you a bigot beyond redemption. It just makes you someone with some sense. And it's actually okay to be someone with some sense. Limits on immigration are also reasonable. Well, we need to figure out what those limits are. And that's what the bloody political dialogue is for. But the fact that it should be limited to some degree is also reasonable. Otherwise, why not just open the borders and let everybody come in? Well, the reason you don't do that is because a complex system cannot tolerate extensive transformation over too short a period of time.
That's
now,
true.
you want immigrants to come in, especially if they're the sorts of immigrants who are likely to contribute properly to the success of your polity. And lots of immigrants do that. I mean, I think the vast majority, for example, of entrepreneurs in the United States come from the Indian subcontinent. So great, you know, bring them over. They're highly educated, they're extraordinarily productive, they make lots of new businesses, and then they pump money like mad back into India. Good deal. But that doesn't mean that we have our arms are open to everyone immigration policy, because it's complete rubbish. All that means is you're not thinking about it. So here's a coda to that for conservatives. Here's something. I've been thinking about this a lot lately. It should not be assumed that citizens of societies that have not evolved functional individual rights predicated polities will hold values in keeping with such polities. So we could say, look, there are a lot of countries in the world that are not governed well. The vast majority of them, right? And they've been not governed well forever. And to me, that means that there's something wrong with the values that are held collectively by the people who've established those polities. Well, you shouldn't be naive and assume that merely because you move them to a new country, they're going to let their innate democratic longings flourish. It doesn't work that way. So if you stand up and say, look, let's be a little cautious. Let's make sure that we don't transform our society so rapidly that we lose what we have. Let's be careful about that. That doesn't mean that you're a morally reprehensible demon. It just means that you're conservative, and it's a reasonable position to hold.
And that's not a white supremacy thing. That's not just a modern, like, racism type thing. It's none of the stuff that you often hear people talk about. You can go throughout history. People often was very conservative, especially like the elders or the people in higher up positions. One side of it might be controlling their power, but also one side of it is that they're seeing their morals and their values deteriorate over time. The Romans saw that in of themselves. They saw it as dealing with the Greeks. They saw the Greeks as effeminate, women-like that type of stuff. Words that nowadays would get you probably canceled. And they was very fearful or push back heavy against it when Greek culture was influenced Roman citizens, especially young Roman citizens that was eventually going to become Roman citizens, like Julius Caesar, like Pompey, like Crassus, like the people that would eventually lead to the Roman Republic stopping being a republic and being an empire ruled by just one guy. Before that happened, people was fearful of not just that happening, but different cultures seeping into the system. Borders exist for a reason, and not just a modern thing. It's a human thing. You're familiar with what you're familiar with, and if you're not familiar with that, you're often going to see it as a danger. Sometimes that's ignorance, but sometimes just protecting yourself, your loved ones, and your possessions.
Basic economics, quote, when only 2% of immigrants from Japan to the United States go on welfare, while 46% of the immigrants from Laos do, there is no single pattern that applies to all immigrants. Everything depends on which immigrants you're talking about and which periods of history. Okay, here's the assignment. The period is today. And the immigrants we're talking about are the roughly 11 million, that seems to be the best estimate, roughly the 11 million who are in this country illegally, overwhelmingly from Mexico. President Obama has issued an executive order protecting about 5 million of them from deportation and other legal penalties. A humane act.
Well, see, one of the things about the immigration debate is they talk about immigrants in the abstract, and there are no immigrants in the abstract, as that passage indicates. And we don't know who those people are that are here. They may all be PhDs from the University of Chicago, in which case they should all stay. Or they may in fact be people who majored in sociology at Berkeley, in which cases get them all out of here as soon as possible. But we don't know. That's one of the problems of so-called immigration policy. We don't have an immigration policy unless we control the border. It doesn't matter what our policy is. If anybody who wants to cross the border can cross, then our policy is just a bunch of words on paper.
Okay, so I think I hear you. I think I can deduce from that set of comments two policies. One is, for sure, you get control of the border.
Yes.
That's just obvious. We get control of the border. But from that point forward, you're as dubious about the editorial position of the Wall Street Journal, which is consistently pro-immigrant, as you are dubious of the President of the United States, because your point is neither one of them really knows in enough detail who these 11 million people are, whether they're doing net good or harm to the economy, So you don't buy the Wall Street Journal argument that,
No.
that on net, surely they're doing more good than harm, more economic good than harm. You don't buy that?
No, and especially when they're trying to talk about having people in agriculture. I mean, this is a country that has had a chronic surplus of agricultural output for decades on end, costing the taxpayers billions upon billions of dollars.
But because the federal government subsidizes the
Yes.
output, the surplus, right?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, yes. And in fact, I think the federal government subsidizes the water that creates the surplus that it then subsidizes again. And I think that any discussion of people in the abstract drives me crazy, because there are no abstract people. 100 years ago, people understood that. And so when there was a debate about immigration, there was a multi-volume set of tomes about the characteristics of the immigrants from various countries. How do their kids do in school?
They had the guts to be picky.
Yes.
They said, we'll take some,
Yes.
but they better do us good.
Yes.
Okay. So what kind of debate would you like to... Congress, as I mentioned a moment ago, has just fallen to the control of Republicans, both houses. Republicans aren't going to be able to move much legislation because the president can still veto it. What kind of debate should they have? What kind of hearing should they hold on immigration?
They should find out what kind of people, how are the people that we know about now, how are their kids doing in school? What is their crime rate? What is their disease rate? All those things, that matters. You know, they brought out all these kids, and I said, these are just kids. Well, you know, kids do grow up, and they have other kids. We don't know. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's a bad thing. We don't have a clue.
Let's elaborate on this a bit more. Okay, so the issue is borders exclude, right? And that's a postmodern proposition, or maybe you could take that even further, that borders exclude and privilege those within the borders. It's like, yes. Okay, so let's take that seriously. Now, part of the seriousness is poor, innocent children are hurt at borders. That happens all the time. Okay, the question is, are you willing to give up the borders? Now, let's think about what borders are. Your skin is a border. Okay? And your prejudice in protection of your skin. For example, you won't just sleep with anyone. You reserve the right to keep that border intact, right? And to be choosy about the manner in which it's broached. You likely have a bedroom. It probably has walls. You have clothing. You have a house. You have a town. You have a state. You have a country. And those are all borders. It's borders within borders within borders within borders. Yep. And you need those borders because otherwise you will die.
It's chaos.
So we could not be too hypocritical about the damn borders. Is like we don't know how to organize fragile things without putting boundaries around them. And you see that in Genesis, right? As soon as people realize that, I'm sneaking in a little religion here in case you didn't notice.
Before he gets into it, one thing he said really clicked with me because it made a lot of sense with the borders within borders within borders. And let's take it a step further. This may not make any sense because I'm not on Jordan Peterson's level. But, okay, let's say you break down the outermost layer of borders, which is, you know, immigration and stuff. But then you have people of all kinds, good and bad, getting into the country. So now at that level, you have people amongst you throughout the different states. That's another border that could maybe or maybe not positively or negatively influence your life due to crime, due to jobs, due to income, due to multiple different things. Maybe homelessness. We never know. Maybe a population increase and more taxes to accommodate for people that's coming into this country now. And they need benefits like welfare, such and so forth. I don't know, but that's another border that's breaking down. But then let's go back to the crime again. If you have crime in your area and there's a percentage of these people that are very, very heinous and evil, they don't give a damn about morality. They don't give a damn about your life to live. They don't give a damn about your own freedoms. They don't give a damn about the Constitution, the amendments, the law, the police. They just see that stuff as like, I don't know, opposition, white supremacy, evil, or they just don't give a damn because they're selfish. But then they invade your most sacred border, your last border, your skin, and the sexual type stuff, or the physical touch type stuff, like Sean Garden Marbury, or grape, or, you know, essay, anything like that. My whole point is, if we possibly break down our whole immigration policy or our outermost borders for our country that we live in, once we break that down, that could seep into different borders, like into state, and then to your neighborhood, and then to your home when someone breaks in, and then onto yourself when somebody tries to assault you. I don't know. Could be BS though. Let me know.
As soon as people realize, they become self-conscious, they wake up and realize their vulnerability, the first thing they do is manufacture a border between them and the world. And we need borders between us and the world. And we pay a bloody price for borders. And I say those words very carefully. We pay a bloody price for borders, and it's often in the price of other people's blood. And so then the question might be, well, how should you conduct yourself ethically in a world where other people are paying in blood for your borders? And the answer that I've been trying to communicate to people is, get your damn house in order. Bear as much responsibility as you can. Act as effectively as you can as an individual in the world. Because then you can justify your privilege. You can justify your luck and your good fortune. And maybe within the confines of your border, you can be more productive and useful than you would be in the absolute absence of borders altogether.
That's a very, very good ending, and I try my best to apply that to my life. Like, for example, I'm not one of these old black people who say, like, the fault of black community is because of these people or that government or this, that, and the other. At the end of the day, the way I am right now is because of my ancestors and them choosing to have children and to fight and be alive. And the way I am right now is because of my father and my mother fighting to be successful and raising me to have some sense. I'm going to use that for my benefit and to do the best with this life that I can. I'm not going to blame somebody else for my problems, because at the end of the day, any suffering that I go through, most of the time, is caused by myself and not through other people. Like, and that's just the way to think, in my opinion, because that's the only way you can self-improve. How can you improve if you're constantly blaming the world for what's holding you back? If you look at yourself and say that this is holding me back, maybe you can stop that stuff, or at least make progress to doing so. And I think that's very important. You don't have to be perfect. Nobody has to be perfect. And honestly, perfection sounds a little boring if you ask me, because you have no room for improvement. If you're perfect at 27 or 37 or 48 or whatever, then what are you going to do for the next, I don't know, 20 something years of your life? Teach other people how to be perfect? I don't know. I think it's better to go on the journey like you did. And that's just the way to be, in my opinion. I don't know. I'm not some guru or some therapist or whatever. I'm just talking how I talk and talking what makes sense to me. You can agree or disagree. That's perfectly fine. But that's all I gotta say. Like, share, and subscribe. It's your boy Logos, and I'll see you next time. Peace.